It was an unusual morning for Maikon. He had awoken with an inexplicable feeling that pushed him out of bed earlier than usual. After a quick morning routine, he found himself already at the wheel of his car, his hands firm on the steering wheel, as the first rays of sun attempted to break through the dawn's grayness. The streets were unusually calm, as if the city shared his state of reflection and anxiety. Maikon, a successful businessman, usually didn't let worries shake him easily, but the recent challenges in his personal and professional life were weighing on him more than he'd like to admit. The smooth traffic allowed his mind to wander through unresolved problems and pending decisions that needed to be made. As he approached the parking lot of his supermarket, a chain of thoughts distracted him until a sudden movement caught his attention. On the edge of his field of vision, a figure was moving hastily. It was a woman, whose appearance was as striking as it was desperate. Her blonde hair was disheveled, falling over a face that reflected deep fear. The clothes she wore were simple and worn, clearly inadequate for the morning cold. She was holding a large bag, apparently heavy, that swung erratically with the rhythm of her hurried run. Maikon slowed down the car, his eyes fixed on the woman. She also noticed his presence, and for a brief moment, their gazes crossed. In her look, there was a complex mix of fear, surprise, and an almost plea for help that Maikon felt reverberate in his chest. He abruptly parked the car, considering for a moment to get out and approach her, but the woman turned a corner suddenly and disappeared from view, leaving behind only the image of her frightened gaze and the swaying bag. Intrigued and disturbed, Maikon sat for a few seconds, the car engine still running. He tried to understand what his instincts were telling him. Should he go after her? Should he help? Or was this just a fragment of the city that he preferred to ignore? With a heavy sigh, he turned off the engine and got out of the car, deciding to take one last look around the corner where the woman had disappeared. There was no sign of her, only the echo of her hurried footsteps that seemed to resonate on the cold walls of the nearby buildings. Returning to the car, Maikon knew that this brief encounter was just the beginning of a day that promised to be anything but ordinary. After the strange encounter, Maikon entered his supermarket, his mind still echoing with the image of the fleeing blonde woman. As he passed through the automatic doors, he was immediately enveloped by the familiarity of his own enterprise. The employees, recognizing his car parked earlier than usual, were already lined up to greet him with warm smiles and respectful greetings. "Good morning, Mr. Maikon," said Carlos, one of the oldest cashiers, with an enthusiastic wave. "You arrived quite early today, huh?" Maikon offered a tight smile in response, his mind still partly captivated by the vision from that morning. "Yes, I decided to start the day earlier. How are things around here, Carlos?" "All quiet, boss. Just the usual hustle," Carlos replied before returning to his post. Walking down the main aisle of the supermarket, Maikon was approached by his manager, Willem, a middle-aged man with an always impeccable posture and analytical gaze. Willem was carrying a folder full of papers and seemed more worried than usual. "Maikon, good morning. We need to talk about some important matters," said Willem, guiding him to a more secluded corner. "It's about the month-end closing and also an incident that occurred last night." Rachel, Maikon's assistant, quickly joined them, carrying an electronic agenda and an equally serious expression. "Good morning, Maikon. I hope your day started well. There are some updates on your schedule as well." "Let's start with the incident," Maikon interrupted, eager to face the problems head-on. Willem opened his folder, pulling out some sheets. "There was a theft here at the supermarket last night. It wasn't a major loss, but the manner in which it happened is concerning." Rachel turned on a tablet and switched to the security screen. "Let me show you the camera footage." She tapped on the screen, and the video began to play. The black and white images showed a hooded figure moving deftly among the shadows of the closed supermarket. The thief, despite being disguised, carried a lightness in movements that Maikon immediately recognized. "Wait, this looks like..." Maikon hesitated, the image of the woman from that morning returning to his mind. "Yes, it's a woman," Willem confirmed, closely observing Macon's reaction. "And something tells me you've seen her before, haven't you?" Macon nodded, absorbing the coincidence, or perhaps the fate. I saw a woman this morning, a homeless one, I think. She looked scared, desperate. Now, seeing this, it seems to be the same person." Rachel and Willem exchanged worried looks. "What do you suggest we do, Macon?" asked Rachel, her voice filled with administrative concern, but also human. Macon rubbed his chin, thoughtful. "For now, let's keep this among us. I don't want to involve the police yet. I need to better understand what's happening. This woman, she seemed more frightened than malicious." Willem nodded in agreement. "Very well, we'll keep things discreet for the time being. And about the business, there are some new contracts we need to discuss. It looks like today will be a long day." Macon shrugged, already moving to start the planned meetings. "So be it, Willem. Let's get to it." As the three headed to the conference room, Macon's mind remained divided between the business and the image of the mysterious woman, whose life seemed tragically intertwined with his in a way that he could not yet fully understand. Back in his office, Macon met again with Johnny, the head of security, who was waiting with a serious posture next to the door. Concerns were clearly stamped on the security chief's face, an expression Macon knew well and which usually preceded complicated news. "Johnny, we need to talk about last night's incident," Macon began, sitting down behind his desk with a weary sigh. Johnny nodded, stepping forward with a folder that appeared to contain reports and images captured by the security cameras. "Yes, sir. I've reviewed the footage several times. It's definitive that the intruder is the same woman you described this morning. Very peculiar, given the circumstances." Macon massaged his temples, feeling the weight of the decision he had in his hands. "Johnny, what do you recommend? Calling the police would be the standard procedure, but something tells me this woman is not a common criminal. She seemed desperate, not malicious." Johnny sat down in the chair across the desk, crossing his arms as he thought. "It's a delicate situation, sir. If she returns, we might be risking more than a few stolen goods. On the other hand, involving the police could complicate her life even further if she really is in desperation." Macon looked out the window, observing the movement outside. People passed by carelessly in their daily routines, oblivious to the dramas unfolding in other corners of the city. What if we simply enhanced security? Maybe add more cameras, increase the night patrols. Give her a chance to start over somewhere else, away from here. Johnny slowly nodded. "I can adjust the guard shifts and install some more cameras in blind spots. I'll ensure that if she returns, we'll be able to intervene quickly, without needing to involve the authorities right away." "Great, let's do that then," agreed Macon, although his heart weighed heavy with the decision. "But, Johnny, stay alert. If something more serious happens, we'll need to reconsider our approach." "Understood, sir. I'll prepare everything and keep you informed of any developments." After Johnny left, Macon was left alone with his thoughts. The image of the woman, her expression of fear and despair, continued to haunt him. He wondered about the untold stories of people facing hardships every day, stories so different from his, though perhaps just a step away. As the afternoon progressed, Macon reflected on the complexities of his choices and the lives that touched his. He knew the decision to not involve the police was a risk, but something inside him insisted it was the right thing to do. Perhaps, deep down, he hoped that this woman would find her way to a better life, just as he had found his many years ago. As the day began to give way to night, Macon prepared to leave the office. He thought about the stark differences between his reality and that of the woman, pondering how thin the line can be that separates success from despair. With these heavy thoughts, he picked up his keys, turned off the lights of his office, and headed to the parking lot, still lost in reflections. Night had already fallen when Maikon locked the doors of his office and headed to the underground parking lot. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long and dramatic shadows over the parked cars. As he walked towards his car, a familiar figure caught his attention. It was the woman he had seen earlier, the same one his cameras had captured. She was walking briskly, casting nervous glances over her shoulder as if she feared being followed. Maikon paused for a moment, observing her as she crossed the parking lot towards the street. His heart beat a little faster, a mix of concern and curiosity flooding him. Memories of his own difficult childhood surfaced, recollections of times when he himself could have been that desperate person. Driven by an impulse he could not ignore, Maikon decided to follow the woman, maintaining a safe distance so as not to be noticed. He got into his car and started it, his eyes fixed on her silhouette as it disappeared down the street. The city at night had a completely different character, the muffled sounds and elongated shadows creating an almost surreal scene. As he followed, Maikon noticed that the woman, who he would later learn was named Diana, was heading towards one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. It was an area he knew well, not just from his business dealings but also because it was part of his past, a past he had left behind, but that had never really left him. Diana walked quickly, almost running now, and Maikon had to slow down to avoid drawing attention. He watched as she turned onto a narrow street, the houses here small and dusty, some of them poorly lit. She seems so nervous, so hurried. What is she fleeing from? Or is she simply trying to survive? He murmured to himself as he drove. The street was poorly lit, the lamps on the posts irregularly spaced, emitting a faint light that barely touched the asphalt. Diana paused for a moment, looking around frantically before continuing, disappearing from view as she turned into another alley. Maikon parked his car at a safe distance and continued on foot. He stayed in the shadows, his heart beating in time with his hurried steps. As he followed, the reality of this area of the city became increasingly evident. The walls were covered in graffiti, small groups of people gathered in corners, speaking softly and exchanging cautious glances with him as he passed. Diana finally stopped in front of a small brick house, as weathered by time as the others, but with a wooden door that appeared to have been recently repaired. Before she could open the door, a joyful voice sounded from inside, breaking the silence of the night. "Mommy, you're back." The voice of a child, pure and full of joy, called from inside the house. A small figure ran out, throwing herself into Diana's arms. Maikon watched from afar, his chest tight with conflicting emotions. He hid behind a parked car, observing the scene. The connection between mother and daughter was palpable, and for a moment, he felt like an intruder in a world to which he no longer belonged. Diana hugged the child, whispering words Maikon couldn't hear, but whose tenderness was visible even from a distance. He knew he could not interrupt that moment, that there was something sacred in that simple reunion. With a heavy heart, Maikon turned away, his doubts and decisions still swirling in his mind as he walked back to his car, leaving the humble street behind but taking with him the image of a daily struggle that was very real and very close. The dim streetlights barely illuminated the small house where Diana and her daughter were reunited. Maikon, hidden in the shadow of an old parked car, watched the scene with a mix of emotion and discomfort. The girl, with her tousled hair and a smile that lit up the night, seemed to overflow with happiness upon seeing her mother. Diana bent down to the child's level, embracing her with a palpable love that transcended words. "How are you, my little Zoe?" Diana asked, her voice laden with affection and relief to be home. "I'm good, Mommy. I made a drawing for you at school today." The girl spoke with the innocence and excitement only a child possesses, pulling her mother's hand towards the house. Maikon, still at a safe distance, could hear fragments of their conversation as mother and daughter entered the modest dwelling. He felt a resistance within himself to get any closer, to cross the line that separated his observation from the reality of their two lives. Inside the house, the yellowed light of a single lamp revealed a simple and worn interior, yet clean and organized. Diana listened attentively as Zoe showed her a colorful drawing, the vibrant strokes contrasting with the sober environment. "Look, Mommy, I drew you and me at the park when we went that day, and you taught me how to make soap bubbles." Zoe's voice was filled with joy as she recalled that day. Diana smiled, her eyes shining with barely contained tears. "It's beautiful, darling. I'll put it on the fridge so we can see it every day." Maikon watched this exchange of love and simplicity, feeling a tightness in his heart. Diana's reality, so different from his own, painted a picture of daily struggles and small victories. He pondered his own life, the luxuries and conveniences he took for granted, and how these small scenes revealed a strength and resilience he seldom needed to invoke. As the night grew darker, Maikon knew he could not stay there much longer without risking being seen. He turned to leave, each step heavy with a burden of what he had witnessed. But before he could completely distance himself, the house's door opened again. It was Diana, appearing to have forgotten something outside. She stopped at the door, looking around, perhaps sensing Maikon's presence, or maybe just being cautious by nature. Their eyes met for a brief moment before Maikon ducked behind the corner of the car, his heart racing. Taking a deep breath, Diana went back inside, and Maikon, with one last look at the house that now symbolized so much, walked back to his car. As he drove back to the comfort of his home, the image of Diana and Zoe remained etched in his mind, a constant reminder of the disparity between their lives. He knew he could not simply forget what he had seen. Something needed to be done, but what was not yet clear. With these thoughts, Maikon drove through the city, the streetlights flashing overhead, each one briefly illuminating his thoughtful face as he approached home, determined to find a way to help. The clock was nearing midnight when Maikon finally arrived at his luxury apartment, a spacious area with a panoramic view of the illuminated city below. The contrast between Diana's humble neighborhood and his own home was striking, and he felt it more deeply than ever as he crossed the entrance hall, where each step echoed on the polished marble. His mother, Helena, was awake, as if waiting for him. Seated in a comfortable armchair in the living room, she had a book open in her lap, but her eyes watched the door. Concern marked her face as she saw Maikon enter, his shoulders slightly slumped, a clear sign of his emotional burden. "Maikon, my son, you seem troubled," said Helena, gently closing her book and adjusting her glasses. "Come, sit here and tell me what's happening." Maikon approached, choosing an armchair next to her. Words were slow to come as he tried to organize his thoughts. "Mother, today I saw something that made me think about our own lives, about what it truly means to help others." Helena leaned forward, her expression a mix of interest and concern. "Tell me more, my son. What did you see?" Taking a deep breath, Maikon began to recount his encounter with Diana and her daughter, describing the poverty and struggle he had witnessed. He spoke of the simple house, the embrace between mother and daughter, and the drawing the girl had made, highlighting how these moments of tenderness occurred amidst such harsh reality. Helena listened attentively, occasionally nodding or offering a murmur of sympathy. When Maikon finished, she remained silent for a moment, thoughtful. "Maikon, it's a vast and complicated world out there, and each person carries their own burden. But it's important to remember that compassion is more valuable than judgment. You saw her life through a window, both literally and figuratively. Now you have the chance to do something positive with what you've learned." "I know, Mother, but what can I do? How can I help without invading her life or making things worse?" Maikon asked, the frustration evident in his voice. Sometimes, help doesn't need to be grandiose or transformative. Small acts of kindness can have a huge impact. Perhaps start by understanding more about her needs. And if there's a way to offer direct help, without impositions, that could be a start. Maikon nodded, his mother's words igniting a spark of determination in him. "You're right, Mother. Tomorrow, I will try to find out more about her, about how I can help in a way that respects her dignity." Helena smiled, pleased. "That sounds like an excellent plan, my son. Remember, every small step is a progression towards a better world." They talked for a few more minutes, discussing possible ways of assistance, before Mycon stood up to go to his room. "Thank you, Mother. Your words always bring clarity to me. I will always be here for you, dear." "Good night," said Helena, as Mycon headed to his room, his mind now occupied with plans and possibilities of how he could, indeed, make a difference in the lives of Diana and her daughter. The night had been long and filled with unsettling thoughts for Mycon. By dawn, he was already up, his mind buzzing with Helena's advice and the images of Diana and her daughter that he couldn't shake off. After a hurried breakfast and a rejuvenating shower, he was once again on his way to the supermarket, a place that now seemed to be at the center of a significant personal crossroads. Upon arrival, the parking lot was bustling with the arrival of employees and the day's first deliveries. Mycon greeted some with a nod as he walked toward the entrance, his mind still preoccupied with plans on how he might address Diana's situation respectfully and effectively. He had barely entered his office when Paula, the shift coordinator, appeared at the door with an urgent expression. "Mycon, you need to come now. There's a situation outside." "What happened, Paula?" Mycon asked, already standing up, feeling a knot in his stomach. "It's the woman you talked about yesterday, Diana. She's out here, and it looks like she's hurt," Paula explained quickly, her voice filled with concern. Without hesitation, Mycon followed Paula outside the building. Next to one of the delivery containers, Diana was sitting on the ground, leaning against the cold metal. She looked pale, and there was a clear expression of pain on her face. Around her, a small crowd of employees gathered, offering help and words of comfort. "Diana!" Mycon exclaimed, approaching quickly. "What happened? How did you get hurt?" Diana looked up at him, her expression mixing relief and shame. I was trying to get something to eat for my daughter. I fell and I think I twisted my ankle," she murmured, clearly embarrassed and in pain. Mycon knelt beside her, observing the ankle that was already beginning to swell. "Let's take care of this right now. Don't worry, everything is going to be okay." He turned to Paula. "Call an ambulance, and please, bring something for her to drink and a blanket." As Paula hurried to carry out the instructions, Mycon stayed by Diana's side, trying to offer some comfort. "You don't have to do this alone, Diana. I want to help you and your daughter." Diana looked at him, tears beginning to form in the corners of her eyes. "Why would you help someone like me?" "Because everyone deserves a chance to improve their lives. And I've seen the way you care for your daughter. She is your life, and I respect that. Let's find a way to help you out of this situation," Mycon replied sincerely, his gaze firm and supportive. The words seemed to give Diana a glimpse of hope, a faint smile touching her lips even through the pain. When the ambulance arrived, Mycon helped carefully transfer Diana onto the stretcher, assuring her that he would be at the hospital soon to ensure everything was all right. With Diana on her way to the hospital and Paula coordinating operations at the supermarket, Mycon returned to his office, his mind now completely focused. He knew what he needed to do and was determined to take all necessary steps to ensure that Diana and her daughter received the support they needed. As he prepared to follow to the hospital, Mycon reflected on the twists life could take. The day was just beginning, but it already seemed like a turning point, not just for Diana, but for him as well. As soon as the ambulance arrived, Mycon acted quickly, accompanying Diana to the hospital. As the vehicle moved through the city, he sat beside her, offering comfort and trying to distract her from the evident pain she was experiencing. The morning light gave way to the intense brightness of the day, illuminating the inside of the ambulance, where concern was palpable. "Diana, you don't need to worry about the hospital costs," Mycon said softly, noticing the anxiety on her face whenever medical care was mentioned. "I will take care of everything. The important thing now is for you to recover." Diana looked at him, a mix of gratitude and incredulity in her eyes. "Why are you doing this for me? I barely know you, and—" She hesitated, clearly struggling to understand his motivation. "I saw something yesterday," Something that made me think about life and how we can make a difference in someone else's life. Helping you is the right thing to do, Maikon explained, holding her hand briefly to offer some comfort. Besides, we all need help sometimes. Upon arriving at the hospital, Maikon ensured that Diana was attended to immediately. He spoke with the doctors, explaining the situation and ensuring there would be no delays due to administrative concerns. While Diana was taken to the examination room, Maikon waited in the hallway, his cell phone in hand as he updated Paula about the situation and managed the supermarket from a distance. After some time, the doctor came out of the examination room, approaching Maikon. "She is stable now," the doctor began, looking at the chart in his hands. "She has sprained her ankle and there will be a period of recovery, but she will be fine. We will wrap it up and give her some instructions for home care." "Thank you, doctor," Maikon responded, relieved. "Can I see her now?" "Yes, of course. She mentioned she would like to talk to you as soon as she was ready," the doctor said, indicating the way to the room where Diana was. Maikon entered the room, finding Diana sitting on a hospital bed, her ankle already bandaged. She looked tired, but there was a glimpse of relief on her face upon seeing him. "Maikon, I don't know how to thank you," she began, her voice weak. "There's no need to thank me, Diana. I'm just glad I can help," Maikon replied, sitting beside her. "Now, the important thing is for you to recover, and we'll need to think of a plan to ensure that you and your daughter are safe and well." Diana nodded, somewhat overwhelmed. "I've always struggled alone. Having someone offer help is new to me. Sometimes, life brings us surprises, and I believe we can all use a helping hand from time to time," Maikon said, smiling. "Let's face this together." As they talked, Maikon felt that a genuine connection was being formed. He was committed to helping Diana not just to recover, but also to rebuild her life. The emergency had brought an unexpected opportunity for a new beginning, and he was determined to make the most of this situation. Sitting beside the hospital bed where Diana was reclining, Maikon felt a mix of compassion and determination. The sterile environment of the hospital seemed distant from the warm conversation they were having. "Diana, if you feel comfortable, I would like to understand a little more about your situation. Maybe I can help more effectively," Maikon began, his voice soft and encouraging. Diana looked at him, her eyes reflecting the hesitation to share her personal life, but the need for help seemed to outweigh her reluctance. She took a deep breath and began to tell her story. "My life wasn't always this difficult," she started, her voice trembling. "I had a good job and a comfortable life. But everything changed when my husband left us. He was the main provider for the house, and after he was gone, debts began to accumulate." Maikon listened attentively, his gaze never leaving Diana. "And your daughter, Zoe, she seems so cheerful despite everything." Diana smiled faintly, a glimmer of pride passing through her eyes. "Zoe is my light. She's so resilient, so cheerful. She's the reason I fight every day. After things got bad, I lost my job, and finding another has been difficult. I don't have family nearby to help, so it's been just me and her against the world." "The situation with the food, was that why you?" Maikon asked delicately, referring to the incident at the supermarket. Diana nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Yes, I was desperate. Zoe hadn't eaten anything decent that day, and I just needed to make sure she had something to eat at night." Maikon felt a pang in his heart hearing Diana's difficulties. He stood up and grabbed a chair to sit closer to her, holding her hand as a gesture of support. "Diana, I can't fully imagine everything you've been through, but I want to help. Not just with food or medical expenses, but in a more sustainable way." Diana looked at him, uncertainty and hope mingling on her face. "What do you mean?" "I want to offer you a job at the supermarket, something that can give you stability and a path to financial recovery. And not just that, I want to help ensure that you have the resources necessary to take care of yourself and Zoe." Macon's words seemed to take a moment to be fully absorbed by Diana, but when she understood, her expression softened, and she squeezed his hand in response. "Would you do that for us?" "Why? Why be so kind?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance, Diana. And I see how much you love your daughter. Let's do this not just as a work arrangement, but as a partnership, where I can help you rebuild your life." Diana finally allowed some tears to fall, her face showing a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Maicon. Thank you for believing in me." As the two discussed the next steps and details of the job, Maicon felt he was doing the right thing, not just as a businessman but as a human being. As they parted that day, with Diana promising to get in touch as soon as she was ready to start, Maicon left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the challenges were far from over, but he firmly believed that together they could overcome any obstacle. The months that followed were a period of transformation for Diana. Under Maicon's guidance, she began working at the supermarket, quickly learning and gaining the affection of colleagues and customers. Stability seemed to have brought new light into her and Zoe's life, who was now attending a better school and had a more structured routine. Maicon watched Diana's progress with paternal satisfaction. He had invested not only in her employment but also in her education, organizing training courses that she attended enthusiastically. Everything seemed to be going well, until suddenly, Diana began missing work. Initially, Maicon thought it might be a minor setback, perhaps a cold or another personal obligation. However, when the absences became more frequent and without any prior communication, concern set in. Determined to understand what was happening, Maicon decided to visit her personally after his shift. Arriving at Diana's house, he knocked on the door with slight hesitation, fearful of what he might discover. It was Zoe who opened the door. The bright-eyed girl seemed worried, a shadow of anxiety under her usual smile. "Hi, Mr. Maicon," she said, trying to maintain a cheerful tone. "Mommy is in the bedroom. She's not feeling very well." "Thank you, Zoe. Are you taking good care of your mom?" Maicon asked as he entered, his heart tight with the situation. "I'm trying," Zoe replied, leading him to where her mother was resting. Diana was lying down, looking pale and visibly weaker than usual. Upon seeing Maicon, she tried to sit up, an expression of apology crossing her face. "Maicon, I'm sorry for not coming to work." "I didn't want to worry you," she began, her voice weak. Maicon sat beside the bed, his expression loaded with concern. "Diana, talk to me. What's going on? Are you sick?" Diana sighed, a look of resignation passing through her eyes before she answered. "I went to the doctor after I started feeling very tired and in constant pain. They did some tests and found out that I have a serious illness, Maicon. That's why I couldn't come to work." Shock and concern mixed on Maicon's face. "Diana, why didn't you tell me earlier? We could have sought medical help together." "I didn't want to be a burden after everything you've already done for me and Zoe," Diana replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "You will never be a burden. We'll face this together, like we've done with everything so far. You are part of our family now," Maicon affirmed, holding her hand firmly. Diana smiled weakly, grateful for Maicon's unwavering kindness. "Thank you, Maicon. I don't know what I'd do without you." Maicon spent the rest of the afternoon with Diana, discussing next steps and ensuring she received the best possible treatment. As he left the house at dusk, he promised himself he would do everything in his power to help Diana overcome this new and unexpected trial. The hospital became a frequent place of visit for Maicon in the following weeks. Each visit, he brought not only his comforting presence but also toys and books for Zoe, who often accompanied her mother during treatments. The cold, impersonal walls of the hospital seemed a bit less intimidating with the girls' laughter echoing down the hallway. On a particularly rainy afternoon, Maicon found Diana looking out the hospital room window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass. She seemed reflective and weaker than usual, despite the smiles she tried to offer whenever Zoe was around. Sitting beside her, Maikon gently took her hand. "How are you feeling today, Diana?" She sighed, turning to look at him with a tired expression. "Honestly, Maikon, it's been tough. The doctors say the treatment is helping, but there are days all I feel is pain and fatigue. It's hard to stay positive." Maikon squeezed her hand, offering an encouraging smile. "You are the strongest person I know, Diana, and you're not alone in this fight." "I know," she replied, managing a fragile smile. "And I'm so grateful for everything. But I worry about what will happen to Zoe if—" "Don't think like that," Maikon interrupted gently. "I promise you, Diana, no matter what happens, Zoe will be taken care of. I'll be there for her, like an uncle, or whatever you'd like me to be. You don't need to worry about Zoe. She will be loved and have everything she needs." Diana looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears she struggled to hold back. "Would you do that? Would you take care of her as if she were your own family?" Without a doubt, Maikon affirmed with conviction. "Zoe is an incredible girl. She deserves the world, and I will do everything in my power to ensure she has opportunities and all the love she deserves." "That's a promise, Diana." Maikon's words seemed to lift a weight from Diana's shoulders, who smiled with deep gratitude. "Thank you, Maikon. That means more than you can imagine." As they talked, Maikon felt the gravity of his promise, but also an unwavering determination. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew he would not back down. He spent the rest of the visit making plans with Diana, discussing how they could ensure a secure and happy future for Zoe, addressing everything from educational matters to emotional support. As he left the hospital that night, Maikon looked back one last time, seeing Diana waving from the window. He felt that, despite the painful circumstances, a new phase of commitment and care was just beginning. As he walked back to his car under the light rain, he pondered the profound meanings of family, promises, and the responsibility he now carried with pride. The sad news arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Maikon was in his office when his cell phone rang, displaying the hospital's number. With a heavy premonition, he answered the call, and the doctor's voice on the other end confirmed his worst fears. "Mr. Maikon, I'm sorry to inform you, but Ms. Diana, she passed away this morning. We did everything within our power, but her condition deteriorated rapidly in the last few hours." The news struck Maikon like a physical blow. He felt the air escape his lungs, and for a moment, everything around him seemed to blur. "Thank you, doctor, for everything you've done," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. Hanging up the phone, Maikon sat motionless, as the reality of what had happened began to settle in. Diana, the woman he had promised to help, who had become a part of his life in a way he never expected, was gone. And now, he had a promise to fulfill. After a few moments gathering himself, Maikon drove to the hospital. Upon arrival, he went straight to the hospital chapel, where he found Zoe sitting alone, her small shoulders shaking as she cried. Maikon slowly approached and sat beside her, wrapping her in his arms. Zoe clung to him, sobbing, as he whispered words of comfort. "Zoe, I know it hurts a lot right now, and it's okay to feel this. Your mom was an incredible woman, and she loved you more than anything." Zoe looked up at him, her eyes swollen and red. "What's going to happen to me now, Maikon?" Her voice was a fearful whisper. Maikon held her hand, looking into her eyes with all the seriousness and affection he could muster. "You're going to stay with me, Zoe. I promised your mom I would take care of you, and I'm going to keep that promise. You are part of my family now, and nothing is going to change that." The girl looked at him, and for a moment, a shadow of relief passed across her tear-streaked face. "Do you promise?" "I promise, Zoe. Together, we'll get through this," Maikon affirmed, squeezing her hand. In the days that followed, as they organized Diana's funeral, Maikon was by Zoe's side every step of the way, ensuring she felt safe and loved. The local community, many of whom had come to know Diana through the supermarket, offered their support, and the small funeral was a moment of shared sorrow but also recognition of Diana's struggle and strength. As the priest concluded the ceremony with a final blessing, Maikon held Zoe's hand tightly, knowing the path ahead would be challenging, but also knowing he would do everything in his power to honor his promise to Diana. Together, they would face the future, a future that Diana fervently wished for her daughter, filled with love and opportunities. In the days following Diana's funeral, Maikon embraced his role as Zoe's guardian with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that beyond ensuring the girl had a stable and loving home, he had the responsibility to keep her mother's spirit and memory alive through actions that reflected her hopes and dreams for her daughter. One quiet afternoon, Maikon sat with Zoe in his home office, a space now equipped with a small desk for her, where she could do her homework and study. New books and school supplies were meticulously organized, a testament to Maikon's commitment to not only provide for her basic needs but also to invest in Zoe's education. "Zoe, your mom always talked about how important education was for you," Maikon began, looking at the girl who was leafing through a science book with childlike curiosity. "And I want to make sure you have every opportunity to learn and grow. What do you think about starting some extracurricular activities? Maybe music or art classes?" Zoe looked up at him, her eyes lighting up with interest. "I would like to learn to paint," she said, a smile forming on her lips. "Mom always liked art." "Then painting it will be," Maikon responded with an equally broad smile. "Let's find a good teacher for you. And how about we also explore some science classes? You seem to like this book." Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I like stars and planets." Maikon nodded, encouraged by her enthusiasm. "Perfect. Let's look for a children's astronomy club. Your mom would have been very proud to see you following your passions." Beyond academic support, Maikon also made efforts to strengthen his emotional bond with Zoe, something he knew was crucial during this period of transition and mourning. He organized outings on weekends, took her to walk in local parks, and dedicated evenings to reading stories before bedtime, establishing a comfortable and secure routine for her. On one such evening, as Zoe snuggled up to him with a fairy tale book in hand, she looked up at Maikon and asked, "Maikon, do you think Mom is watching us now?" Maikon felt a tightness in his heart from the question, but kept his voice soft and reassuring. "Yes, dear, I believe she is. And she's very happy to see that you are happy and learning new things." Zoe smiled, satisfied with the answer, and cuddled closer to him. "I miss her, but I'm glad you are here with me." "I will always be here, Zoe," Maikon promised, hugging her. "Together, we're going to do many great things that your mom would have wished for you." Reflecting on future plans, Maikon felt a mix of sadness for the loss of Diana and optimism for the future he was helping to build for Zoe. He knew that every decision he made now was a brick in the legacy that Diana wanted to leave for her daughter, and he was determined to honor that legacy with all the love and strength he could muster. As the days began to warm with the arrival of spring, Maikon felt it was time to renew not just hopes, but also concrete plans for Zoe's future. On a sunny afternoon, he invited his mother, Helena, to join them in the garden, where they discussed Zoe's progress and her future needs. "Helena, you have been an inexhaustible source of wisdom for me," Maikon began, as they watched Zoe playing with a dog they had recently adopted, a sign of more stability and joy in their lives. "I want to ensure that Zoe has all the opportunities one had, and even more. I want to discuss some ideas with you, to make sure we're on the right path." Helena, always ready to offer her support, nodded with an encouraging smile. "Of course, Maikon. Tell me what you're thinking." "Firstly, I'm considering moving Zoe to a school that offers a more robust educational program. Additionally, I've been researching education savings funds to ensure we can cover her university studies in the future," Maikon explained, clearly dedicated to every detail of the planning. Helena listened attentively, petting the dog while pondering. "Those are excellent ideas. Education is a gift that keeps giving throughout life. What else do you have in mind?" "I'd also like to involve her in more extracurricular activities. She's shown interest in art and science, so maybe painting classes and a young scientists club. I want her to explore her interests, to find her passion, Mycon continued, his gaze following Zoe, who ran laughing through the garden. What about her safety and emotional well-being? Helena asked, always practical. I'm thinking of consulting a child psychologist to help Zoe process her mother's loss and adjust to all these changes in her life. I want her to feel she can talk about her feelings and that she's safe with us, Mycon responded, his tone revealing the depth of his commitment. Helena smiled, pleased with her son's maturity and care. You're doing a wonderful job, Mycon. Diana would be proud. And you'll always have my support, every step of the way. Mycon nodded, grateful. Thank you, Mom. It means a lot to me to have you by our side. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, Mycon called Zoe to join them. The girl approached running, her hair shining under the last rays of the sun. Zoe, we're going to do some new and exciting things together, Mycon announced, as she settled next to him, curious. You'll have many adventures learning about things you like, and I'll be here with you for every new discovery. Zoe looked at Mycon and then at Helena, a smile forming on her face. That sounds fun. Can I start learning about the stars and also paint? Exactly that, Mycon confirmed with a smile, while Helena laughed with excitement for her granddaughter. Comforted and excited by the promises of a future filled with love and security, Zoe hugged Mycon and Helena. In that moment, they were a united family, ready to face whatever the future might bring, each supporting the other in the new beginnings that lay ahead. Night had fallen, and the city lights twinkled like distant stars, seen from the height of Mycon's apartment. He was on the balcony, immersed in deep thoughts about the twists his life had taken, feeling the unbreakable connection he now had with Zoe. His reflection was interrupted by the soft voice of Helena, approaching with an old box in her hands. Mycon, I was organizing some old photo albums and found something you need to see, said Helena, her voice tinged with a mix of nostalgia and mystery. Curious, Mycon turned to look as she opened the box and pulled out an old photograph album. She carefully flipped through the pages until she stopped at a specific photo, a time-yellowed image showing a group of children in a school photo. Look here, Mycon, Helena pointed to two particular faces in the photo. Do you remember anything about this photo? Mycon stepped closer, taking the album and looking attentively. There was a boy he immediately recognized as a younger version of himself, and beside him, a smiling girl who was strangely familiar. As he fixed his gaze on her, realization struck him like lightning. Diana, he murmured, his heart racing. She was in my class. Yes, confirmed Helena, watching his reaction carefully. You used to talk about her when you were a child. A little friend with whom you enjoyed playing at recess. You two were inseparable at school. Mycon felt a whirlwind of emotions. The revelation that Diana and he had known each other in childhood, long before their paths crossed again under such dramatic circumstances, was almost unbelievable. It seems fate had plans for us, didn't it? To reunite after all these years, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Helena placed a hand on his shoulder, offering maternal comfort. Sometimes, life has a mysterious way of weaving its stories. Perhaps there was a reason for you two to meet again. I believe there was, Mycon agreed, slowly closing the album. And now, all I can do is ensure that Zoe has the future Diana always wanted for her. To honor her memory and this reunion that was meant to happen. Helena smiled, her gaze full of affection and admiration for the man Mycon had become. And I'll be here with you, every step of the way. As the night progressed, Mycon stayed on the balcony a bit longer, looking out at the city lights. The photo had reignited long-forgotten memories of a pure and joyful childhood friendship, and now he carried not only the responsibility but also the legacy of a promise made by both coincidence and fate. With Helena by his side and Zoe sleeping safely in her new home, Mycon felt ready to face the future, no matter what it brought.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.